Hi, I'm David Pepose, and this is my secret origin for Comics Online.
David, so excited to talk to you at Comic-Con. I'd love to celebrate your secret origin. It's Comics Online's 25th anniversary, so we're doing secret origins, but not about the characters you write and create, but yours. So
Sure.
How did you find yourself working in the world of comics, and what was your entry into comics in general?
Yeah, I'm a lifer. I'm a third-generation comics fan. My mother read them. My grandfather read them. And so my first industry job, I was an intern at DC. I worked on Batman R.I.P., I worked on Final Crisis, I worked on Green Lantern Secret Origin, I worked on even some early pages of the Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams' Batwoman in Detective Comics. And that was super fun. I wound up working in comics journalism for a while after that over at Newsarama. And eventually I kind of hit that moment in my life where I was like, maybe I want to take a shot at this, try to figure out like how I want to make my mark on the industry. I had thought I wanted to be an editor. I realized being an editor is super hard. But I tried writing a script just to see how it would feel, and I really enjoyed that process. And so I found an artist online, really enjoyed working with him, and then found a letterer and a colorist and really enjoyed working with them. And that book wound up becoming Spencer and Locke, my breakout book. And people seem to like that, and so that really kind of gave me permission to kind of pursue comics as a full-time career, and so far I've been really lucky enough to be able to do that.
Well, you've been exploring so many amazing properties between Space Ghost, you're now taking on Speed Racer, we've talked about Cable, Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Are you just trying to knock off your childhood bucket list of revisiting the 80s and 90s, or what is your approach to selecting titles that you want to work on personally at this point?
It's funny because it's always about the potential and what kind of stories can I tell in that. So much, especially when you're working in licensed comics, sometimes you're able to sort of call your shot. Like Captain Planet, I've been carrying a torch for that for a long time because I've seen the potential. It's a book that to me is X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. How could you not love that? And so I've been like pitching every publisher in the industry that for as long as I've been in the industry. So Dynamite, getting that license, I was in the right place at the right time to do that. But more often than not, it's publishers coming to the creators and saying, hey, would you want to tackle Cable? How would you feel about Speed Racer? And so you start to think about it and say, what kind of stories could I tell here? Is this interesting to me as a creator? Do I think I could tell a story that makes me feel something, that can make a reader feel something? So, for Cable, for example, I thought doing something that I pitched as Edge of Tomorrow meets The Fault in Our Stars, we were able to not only do like the time-traveling pyrotechnics that you need in a good Cable story, but also really digging into these like deep and thorny questions about mortality and your own agency, and sort of being able to figure out like what's a dignified death in the face of terminal illness. These are all thorny questions that I was like, oh, that's like interesting emotional texture. Or Speed Racer, where it's like, oh, this is a sports comic, where I can do a car chase every issue. And that car culture is American culture. And so there's so many interesting things you can do within that aesthetic. And also such an interesting challenge of doing a 16-issue run where there's a car chase in every issue. How do you convey that sense of speed and intensity and motion and stakes and tension and make it different each and every time? And so every book is its own challenge. Every book has its own appeal to it. And so for me, I have been lucky that I've been able to tackle some childhood favorites, writing like Avengers Unlimited or Spider-Man Unlimited, where I've written the Avengers or Spider-Man or the Guardians of the Galaxy. But for me, it's knowing every book is a marathon. So I need to know that I can be able to run that marathon and find something interesting, because if I can't do it, then I know that won't show to the readers.
Well, we've had conversations about your comics. The second issue of Space Ghost still remains my favorite from your run thus far.
Thank you.
Everything about it, I really liked how you were able to expand upon his universe in a very short amount of time. The first issue was killer,
yeah,
but the second issue really solidified it for me.
Thank you.
And obviously this is a character that hasn't had a lot of time in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And I like how you've been able to weave in elements for his world without it feeling a little too hokey.
Sure. Thank you. I mean, Space Ghost is a great example of that was not a property that I was seeking. Dynamite approached me. And it was one of those things, I grew up watching Coast to Coast, and I talked to some trusted friends of mine who were a little older than me, who were around during, and cognizant when Space Ghost was hitting his 80s revival. And I was like, do you think I should take it? And my friends were saying, I think you could do something really cool and interesting with this. It's sort of this Batman figure set in cosmic Buck Rogers space. You can do a lot with that. And so I started watching the original cartoons, and that's really, whenever I do a nostalgia book, you start with the source material. You have to do your homework, and I was so struck. I was familiar with Coast to Coast, and I was familiar with the Joe Kelly Batman Begins style origin of Space Ghost. But I was really intrigued to see that Jan and Jason Blip were such a core part of the book. It's an ensemble series. And I realized that was like a through line that had never really been thoroughly explored. How does Space Ghost get 2 kids and a monkey in his orbit? And that became really the heart of our story. And, that ongoing dynamic. I mean, it's fun to have pyrotechnics, of course, and figuring out what new threat Space Ghost is going to fight. But if there's no heart beating beneath it, it doesn't mean anything. And I think Jan and Jace are the heart of that book, and so watching Space Ghost kind of find his feet as this surrogate father figure, that's been the real draw of that series to me.
And I would be remiss if we didn't talk Captain Planet a little bit.
Yeah.
Captain Planet's back and got a kick-ass beard. Updating the Planeteers felt like it was probably one of the more challenging elements. Is that correct, or would it be a little bit easier?
It's funny. I've had a long time to think about it. We announced the Captain Planet, I guess it was in January, I think, or February. And it was funny. It marked the 10 years to the day that I told a friend of mine, hey, it'd be neat if somebody rebooted Captain Planet. So it's been my white whale for a long time. So I've had a lot of time to think about it, of just like, what are the bones of that? Like the core elements that have made it endure. And then how do you sort of revisit that or accentuate that in the year 2025? What storytelling choices can you make, especially for a more adult audience? And so, and it was also 1989 when Captain Planet first came out. It was very much the world outside its window. And that's why people sometimes give it a bad rap for feeling dated. So if you're trying to do something in the year 2025, a book that's built on inclusivity and diversity, how do we push that envelope? So, having Kwame be, a character with a disability, I thought that was very important to have that representation. Having Guy be, have some LGBT representation, I thought that was really important. I love the socioeconomic kind of conflict between Wheeler and Linka, where, Wheeler is very much a blue-collar auto worker who is, through no fault of his own, has been sort of, raised as a skeptic of the environmental movement through his real life experience. And meanwhile, Linka is, a staunch progressive, an anarchist even, who, in a lot of ways, she does believe in what she says, but it's also a degree of rebellion against her oil magnate father. And so, and then of course Mati, actually he was, I think, the biggest. Once I figured out how he worked years ago, I was like, this is the key, is you make Mati mysterious, you make him cool, you make him brood. Like, he's a guy who grew up in a very violent place, and he was about to sort of do that kind of violence to others. And then he gets the power of heart, and it cleanses his mind of all rage and anger, and it turns him into a pacifist. And that's an interesting character of somebody who's embracing this second chance, and how does he still maintain himself as an effective member of the team when he's not going to throw a punch. So it's been a really fun exercise in just figuring out, like, how do you make all these component parts feel cohesive, that nobody's asking, well, how does this work? We answer all the questions, we have. How does Gaia assemble the Planeteers? How do they meet? What's the deal with the Geo Cruiser? All these answers are going to be explored in our stories. So, yeah, it's just been a real treat, and it's nice to see the amazing response that we've had to the book so far.
Well, 2 issues in, it has absolutely been fun to read.
Thank you.
And I think that the tone becomes very clear by the end of the second issue.
Yeah.
Mati in particular was a highlight. He always felt like, sort of an afterthought in the original show.
Often treated as a punchline.
Yes. So I like that you've already twisted that aspect and made him a stronger character.
Thank you.
Any other projects you're working on that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so Speed Racer, which by the time this video drops, should be available at your local comic shop, coming out through Mad Cave Studios. And yeah, we debuted issue 1 actually here at the con, a little sneak preview for anybody here at the show. And yeah, you know, we're taking a very similar approach to what we're doing in Space Ghost and Captain Planet. It's brand new continuity, so you don't have to watch the show. It's Rocky in a race car. We're watching Speed Racer, who's sort of the last of a legendary racing family. He's winning back alley street races to pay the rent. And unfortunately, something happens in our first issue that the stakes are raised very immediately for him in a very personal way, and he finds himself having to compete in the professional league of Formula X racing. And, you know, he's Picasso paints, Jordan dunks, Speed Racer drives. That's who he is. It's his skill, it's his talent. But he still has a lot to learn. And so watching this hero's journey, you know, as he meets, you know, Trixie, who's the owner of a race car team, and also his love interest, his new love interest. Seeing his younger brother Spritel, who's sort of a live streamer and his color commentator. Pops Racer, his sort of contentious relationship with this legendary mechanic who doesn't want his son to race. And of course the mysterious Racer X, who for him racing is a form of vengeance. It's a great cast. We get to do really cool car chases and races in every single issue. It's a sports book with some crime undertones, and it's unlike anything I think you'll see on the stands. David Tinto, our artist in the book, is doing an amazing job. And like Space Coast, we've got a long runway for it. This is a 16-issue series planned, so we've got a lot of ground to cover, and it's going to be really, really fun, I think.